formatting. So go.
Okay. Well, like I said, just welcome to any of the Arizona Archaeological Society members that are joining us tonight. And I'll let Chris Laser introduce this since he's much more expert on this subject material.
Okay, well, thanks. Ray Williamson really needs no introduction to this group. Um, he's going to be talking about the archaeology of coastal Peru, which is a fascinating subject. It's basically um, the Inca, rose on the shoulders of these ancient civilizations that came before them, like Caral and the Moche and the Nazca. And tonight he'll hear more about it from Ray and his trip.
Well, this is a mix of my trip with the Archaeological Society this past August and September, and my wife Carol and I visited a, a number of sites. Um, what's characteristic of one of the society's trips is that there isn't a moment left to relax. Um, you're on the go every day. And part of this was for me to remember and to sort of intensify my understanding of pre-Inca archaeology. Um, I focused primarily on the Moche people from roughly 100 to 800 Christian era, and the Chimu people who came after them. Um, and we'll also talk a little bit about the site called Pachacamac, which is a site south of Lima, which extended um, into the Spanish period. So it experienced not only the Pachacamac people, but the Wari, who founded this site, but also um, the um, the Inca who conquered it, and then it's stayed into the Spanish period as a site of pilgrimage. So I think it's important to remind ourselves of the topography of Peru because it matters a lot in the development of these, especially the civilizations on the coast, because they were all the Mochi and the Chimu and the Pachacamac were all created, settled in the desert, uh, and very dry, extremely dry, um, and were subject to El Nino and the whole rhythm or failure of the rhythm of the El Nino. So, one thing you notice right away if you fly into Lima in August, September, and so forth is the foggy skies. Um, it's subject to this fog, ground fog, which is called the Garua. Um, and which is kind of a different experience because it's foggy every day. Um, the the cultures along the coast were made possible by the fact that there are a number of rivers that flow down from the mountains, and the people along the coast um, invested quite a bit of effort into irrigation systems and so forth to make it possible to grow crops in this very dry coastal environment. Um, and just to catch you up to date with the where the different modern cities are in Peru, You see, sort of in the middle is Lima. To the north west is the city of Trujillo, which is about the fourth largest city in Peru, and then a much smaller city called Chiclayo. But the sites I'm going to talk about are located primarily between Trujillo and Chiclayo, with the exception of Pachacamac, which is south of Lima. And this fellow you find around Peru commonly. Um, that's just for fun. Um, and we're going to be talking about what are called the early intermediate cultures, the northern and southern Moche. The other groups, Reque, Lima, and so forth and so on, um, also have archaeological sites associated with them that you can visit. Some of them are easier to visit than others, and basically, our group focused on the Moche and the well, in the early intermediate cultures um, here. Um, and this fellow is the decapitator god, so called, and is seen throughout the Moche structures and over and over again. Maybe here's a good example of him in a lot more fierce manifestation, um, making it clear that he's got the tool. Whoops, sorry. The tool to carry out the decapitation of the um, person that has lost his head there. Um, Again, another map. Um, we um, we took a look at. Um, Whoops, sorry, I'm having trouble getting my pointer working. Okay, we visited the pyramids of the Moche, then another one called El Brujo. There's another one up here called Sipan, and they all have different characteristics, but overlapping, very similar as well. Um, but typical coastal landscape today is lots of crops growing on certain parts of the coastal landscape. But here we are at Chan Chan, which is a Chimu site, looking at um, the remnants of the city that was there, but also you can see in this modern landscape that the farm fields, modern farm fields, just come right up to it and sometimes take over the land. Um, this is kind of the sign of the times, because this sign was found there at those so-called huacas de Moche. Huaca is a term that in the Moche culture, whoops, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Uh, but the term huaca means a sacred site. It has other meanings, which I'll describe in a minute. So the multiculture we see between 100 and 800. There are currently these large settlements near Trujillo. And what's interesting about them is that they seem to be a group of settlements that shared common culture, but they were not governed by one large group that had them under their thumb. So there was a bunch of different ones. Um, they were highly stratified in their social and political structure. And as far as we know, no written language as well. But we can find out a lot about the daily activities of the Moche through their pottery, their textiles, their gold and copper work, and also the tools that they left. Their pottery is especially significant in understanding who these people were, because you'll see very detailed scenes of agriculture, hunting, fishing, sexual encounters. The Larco Museum in Lima, for example, has an entire large room devoted entirely to um, pottery depicting sexual encounters. Also, you see fighting and sacrifice and very elaborate religious ceremonies depicted on the sides of these pots. Some of them, well, you'll see. They were also skilled builders. Their city structures were entirely of adobe brick. Um, and they had developed these extensive irrigation networks to support their agriculture, um, using the water that came down from the mountains. And here's some example of Moche pottery. There's the one on the left, upper left, is a birth scene. Here's this gentleman in a hat with very clear features, and some of the pots you can actually imagine that they were from particular folks. It's a bat. Over on the right is this fellow who was clearly in the fighting spirit. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Down on the left, you see some that curious pot is actually depicting a group of potatoes. And this fellow with the rope around his neck is a prisoner. Usually the prisoners are depicted as naked. And we have the Lauren Boebert ceremonial pot here. And then finally, this sea lion pot on the far right. So they're very varied, but they tell you a lot about the environment, a lot about how people interacted with each other, and so forth. Again, some more pots. It illustrates the items that are fairly important for them. And let me go on. And this, what we have in front of us here is the in front of the mountain, the structure called Huaca de la Luna. And as I mentioned, Huaca, and as part of that, you see I can show you the next slide. That here's a section of that Huaca that's been excavated and so forth, and gives you some indication of how they built their adobe walls. What's interesting to me is they seem to build their adobe walls in these columns of adobe bricks in places. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I'd like to discuss this with somebody who understands building with brick and especially with adobe brick. Um, what I find interesting, among other things, about these structures is, let's go back here to the Huaca de la Luna, that one of the things you see there is that it's full of holes. Those are largely holes dug by looters who were going into these structures to find gold objects. And there were plenty of individual gold objects in burials and so forth in these structures. And they might have been totally destroyed, except that one, they're very large. It's a lot of work for generally not much in the way of gold, because the actual burials are few and far between. And one of the things is that they don't look very inviting to people, because once the adobe brick sits out for a number of years, even in this desert environment, they get hit periodically by very heavy rains caused by disruptions in the El Nino pattern. So by the time especially for the Moche area, um, by the time the Spanish got there, they looked just like big dumps of sand. So if you go inside these, excavate enough away to get into the interior walls, what you discover is that most of the walls are covered with these embossed imagery, highly painted. This, unfortunately, you'll see some better examples shortly, but this gives you an idea of what the walls look like. And the term Waka, by the way, is laid out here. I thought this was very interesting because it's a Quechua term, by the way, and it pronounced Waka, and it can mean natural features, man-made structures like temples or shrines, or pyramids, and so forth and so on. Can even mean spirits that are inside these structures. Here is a structure called Huaca Cal Viejo. Cal Viejo essentially means old man, and what this depicts is the current situation at Cal Viejo, where they have done quite a bit of excavation, and what they're actually excavating to build a model of is this structure you see on the lower right. And basically, excuse me, but I've got stuff in the way here. I need to get out of the way. There we go. And you'll see in this corner, where this little round red square is located, is where one of the very important burials was discovered. But basically, you see that this is a step-type pyramid structure with this large plaza out in front. And what they've tried to depict on this drawing is the wall, which depicts these embossed or sculpted surfaces of designs. And each of these structures sitting on top of this is just preventing any moisture from hitting the structure that they're excavating, so that they can actually show it to visitors. Um, and here, for example, is the burial chamber that was discovered that up in that corner. Um, and in it, they found a person they have called La Senora de Cal, or the Dama de Cal. Uh, and her burial chamber was decorated with these different features that you see in your image here. Um, and on the floor, you see the holes that were created to bury her attendants, and her burial stuff, um, which was quite extensive. Um, Here is an idea of her, what she might have looked like if she were living. Notice she's got the um, a cap on, which with this piece of gold above it. She's also wearing a nose piece, and I'll show you some examples of those from the archaeology later. But apparently, this was part of the elite's dress. Um, I don't find it it doesn't look very comfortable, frankly. But notice she has tattoos on her arms. She's wearing a dress in this case with a design on it. The Moche people um, wove cloth out of cotton, alpaca, and other fibers. They were good designers and creators of textiles of all different kinds, um, from the nets that they needed to use for catching the fish on the coast, and also obviously some fine clothes to wear. Um, so she was about 5 feet tall. They can tell from an extensive examination of her body. Oh, and by the way, I should have emphasized that she was a natural mummy. They made no effort to use chemicals to preserve the body. It dried up because it's so dry there. She probably died of eclampsia after childbirth. That they were able to see what she had eaten shortly before she died: corn and some sort of marine food stuff. Um, they think that the tattoos of serpents and spiders on her arms were linked to fertility beliefs, and you see she was buried with a bunch of stuff. You might, if you're interested in this subject, you can see a fairly decent YouTube presentation of almost an hour long of the excavation and examination of the Lady of Cal. So you just
Great.
need to um, Google Lady of Cal in YouTube.
Can I ask you a question on
And
that
yeah,
slide?
sure. Yes.
Maybe it's answered. I was going to ask if the crown or headdress that she's wearing there, was that preserved? Was the
Yes.
iconography on that preserved?
Yes. I believe
It
so.
looks very reminiscent of something discovered or excavated by Bob Benfer in the same area, in a place they call the Pueblo Bonito, ironically enough.
Oh,
But
really?
there they had two temples with astronomical utility. One was
Uh-huh.
called Temple of the Fox, and the other was called the Temple of the Ominous Disc, that had a big circular stone that looks very much like the center of the headpiece on her
Oh,
crown.
interesting. Yeah, I'm not absolutely sure that this was, but I believe they wouldn't have put it on this drawing if it hadn't been part of their um, burial goods, I believe. Um, and here's another, yeah, and there's the head. As you can see, it's not very clear in this example, but here's another possibility for her clothing. And notice that that she's wearing gold panels. That doesn't look very comfortable to me, but it looks like it's got cloth behind it, so maybe it was all right. One of the things she's holding, there's two items that look like some weird scepter, are actually examples of fighting tools. So it's a form in gold of the some sort of club that they use for fighting. But okay, and this I found interesting as well in doing some research on this. This drawing is directly from one of the pots. These are what the pots look like, except this one is laid out on a two-dimensional surface instead of wrapped around the pot. And what it what they think it is displaying is a sacrifice ceremony. And this person A is accepting a cup of blood taken from one of their victims from the priest B, and the priest is accompanied by a priestess C, and the person they think it corresponds to the Senora de Cal. Notice that the garment is looks like the same type of blocks of squares of gold um, on the outer garment. So just one of the things that they've tried to understand using the pots and so forth, try to understand more of the lives of the Moche people. Here's an example also from a pot of a victim to the left, and notice that all the victims are unclothed. Um, Perhaps because they were about to be sacrificed. It's an additional, not having your clothes is an additional form of punishment for them. But here we've got on the left, the victim um, encountered by the decapitator, who's got a large axe in his hand. This thing here, um, and this person. Whoops, sorry. Um, the soldier here is retaining one of the victims that will then presumably lose his clothes and be decapitated and sacrificed by decapitation. So just to underscore the importance of sacrifice as an important activity there, on the left is a depiction of the decapitator god decapitating somebody's head. And on the right is one of the prisoners, again, with a rope around his neck and naked. And this theme of naked prisoners is emphasized in this wall with the folks who are you can't see this very well, but they're all tied together by a rope. And again, they are all naked. Um, and here's, I love this image as well. This spider wall um, image. With on, you notice that you've got um, the spider image is holding a head on the right. So near Chiclayo, to the north of Trujillo, is a huaca called Huaca Sipalan. And in the upper picture, the picture of the huaca, as it's seen today, this is out of a book, obviously. And on the lower image is an artist's conception of what the structure underneath, the kind of pyramid and other structures um, that they believe was the original. In that, they found a burial, very sumptuous burial, um, equivalent essentially to the Lady of Cow. And this is, they call the Lord of Sipan. And notice that um, this burial has shows that there were other people buried there as well. These were people who were likely sacrificed to accompany the Lord of Sipan in his trip in the underworld. Um, and the next slide shows you what they think the well-dressed Lord of Sipan might have looked like with all his gold finery. On the left of the figure here is how they found the actual burial of his tomb with all of these layers of clothes and other items that are part of um, his own objects of life. And and by the way, one of the things that I found kind of fun there was often in either in the um, park areas that contain these huacas and the museums that go along with it, you might find either people dressed in what they think was the garments of these elite people, or in this case, statues that were erected there and are part of the scene when you visit these areas. Kind of found that kind of fun. Um, and if you go along the waterfront, and this is near or in rather Juan Chaco, one of the smaller villages um, along the coast. You find, in addition to the water, these boats or made of totora reed, and these are the same kind of reeds that Thor Heyerdahl. Those of you who are old enough to remember Thor Heyerdahl um, might remember that he used this raft made of totora reeds. These are used today in everyday individual fishing along the coast. So here you have some examples. They call them the caballito de totora. Right? It means the little horse made of totora. And there's an example in today's world. On the right, upper right, you see an example of a totora reed boat in pottery with the person um, rowing the victim who is tied up again with a rope around his neck, and behind is another victim also with a rope around its neck. Um, and on the bottom um, left are some examples, more examples of the um, Totora boats. And I love this one on the right, lower right, with a Totora boat, and then this tiny little Totora boat with what's presumably a child uh, on it. But um, this shows you how that people actually use the boat there on the left. And of course, you get a example of the fisherman bringing his catch in on the right. Um, and down on the lower right is an example of a person um, who appears to be dressed up as um, somebody from the Moche community um, with on a Totora boat um, with a head on it. Um, but on the wall, there are examples of Totora, a large one here, and then underneath, um, very stylized versions of what archaeologists believe are meant to be Totora boats. So now switching to a totally different subject, um, we've got the these nose pieces um, shown, um, and then in addition, this fellow in the lower center, which is a Chimu piece um, that is a piece of jewelry, not part of the nose pieces, but just a very intricate piece of gold. Some more gold done by the Moche people. Um, ah, and these fellows here are pottery from that are copies of pottery found among the Moche and used to indicate the men's and women's bathroom. Not clear to me why they think they need to show the modern equivalent as well, but um, it's kind of funny to see this on the wall in this one of the museums. Um, and here again is some interior of the Huaca de la Luna with spider figures, the folks down below holding hands. I don't know whether these are meant to be prisoners or not. They might be. And then above, you see serpent-like figures. Um, Here again are some more of that same kind of figures holding hands, and below them, people who are carrying weapons and presumably are getting ready for battle. Um, and this illustrates just how three-dimensional these images are. Um, and the difference between cleaning them up a little bit and leaving them as they found them with the covering, a light covering of adobe on top of the uh, carved figures. again, some more of these folks. Now, not all of them, not all of the painted figures were carved in. Some of them were on flat surfaces like these. Um, and I don't know what these niches were used for, um, but there was no sign there that gave you an indication of what that might mean. Now, here is the one piece of astronomical content, and an important one, but very puzzling. In the center is a mural, again, kind of carved in to the surface, and indicating a bunch of figures and star-like images as well. And I'll show that in a second. Here is what they call the mural of the myths, because clearly there's a bunch of stories here. And some people have tried to interpret this um, in various ways, and I won't go into that because it's complicated, and this mural alone would take a whole presentation. But one of the investigators of this mural has decided, taking just the stars out and showing where the stars are in the mural, as that person has decided that these are actually images showing the stars of some very important constellations to people there: Scorpio, Sagittarius, Orpheus, Serpens Caput, and so forth, southern hemisphere constellations. And you can take it or leave it. I haven't investigated this in detail. I just note that this work has been done. I have a copy of a book called the Moche Cosmos, which is very thick and spends most of its time on this subject and others. But I just want to move on to some other features of the Moche culture. One of the things that I found kind of surprising is the complexity of their textiles in color and design. You see on the left a pottery piece which shows a possible piece of clothing on the painted on the outside of the pottery. In the center is some sort of hat, which with these knots hanging down from it, but very clearly a hat or cap. And underneath is again another set of images from a pot that shows the type of designs that some of it quite intricate that the Moche people may have worn, or at least the soldiers might have worn. And here is a depiction of the Moche weaving process, which was taken from a picture done by the Moche people, showing the process of weaving, and a piece of the weaving found in one of the tombs with colors, beautiful colors, and beautifully preserved. And in fact, you'll see that this is one of the things we did in the trip was visit a village where people dressed up for us in traditional Inca garb. Um, and Here is an example of weaving that is done just like the Moche were doing 1,000, 1,500 years ago. Same kind of loom. And beautiful, beautiful. These people do wonderful weaving. And we're exploring the possibility of purchasing some from them for a friend's shop um, in um, in Baltimore, Maryland. Any rate, um, here's another example of um, mochi textiles. Only this is presumably leather, showing the this creature in the center who is has a number of arms um, like serpents. Um, and again, this is the sort of thing you find. Here's a bus stop in in outside of Trujillo that has these different um, themes of the local archaeology. And this slide I should have taken out. But what it does is I'm just trying to show that um, for the North Coast, um, in this case, the chronology is set up like the Moche people, intermediate period, um, medium um, horizon, horizonte or horizon, um, intermediate in as you go up, intermediate, late intermediate period, and so forth and so on into the colonial period. So they have a different way of describing these periods, and it helps to know that, to know what sort of culture that you're looking at when you visit a museum. Um, so inside this museum, which will is devoted to the Chimu people, you see again some more of the same kind of structure, but obviously this is a modern wall with the same kind of design as you'd find inside those um, adobe brick structures. And this is just to point out that um, you'll see wherever these three little dots are Chimu um, archaeological sites. Um, one large one, huge one, is called Chan Chan, just outside of Trujillo. And here's an example of it as seen from an aerial photograph that I was able to dig up. Um, and you see the Huaca there, and also where they have cleared away a lot of the overlay and shown the structure of the city itself. There are several thousand people that live there, apparently. Again, some more of the structure. Um, on the inside of the Chimu pyramids and structures, you find again walls that are covered with either covered or have a layer at least of designs. Here's what looks like a bunch of squirrels, some fish, lots of maritime. Here's some birds that may be, in fact, pelicans. Um, and of course, a number of different designs on this mauve wall. Um, Chimu textiles, they were um, like the Moche, but even more so, they were really did some incredible textiles with intricate designs and very bright colors, um, often. Here's another couple of examples. Um, and on the right, you see one of their textiles um, done with feathers, and on the left is one with a what looks like a bunch of caps of some sort. Um, and this is one of my favorites. You could meet this guy in Hawaii, and except for the gold pieces that are hanging from the shirt, um, that person would feel right at home in Hawaii. Um, and here's an example of two dioramas in one of the museums showing what they think, how they think people, in one case, carried their leaders on pallets. Um, and the one on the left is a representation of where this, in the mythology, this leader came ashore from a distant land and founded the Chimu Empire. Now, the reason there's actually a myth about this that's available is that the Chimu actually survived into the Inca period, and there were descendants of the Chimu people available for the Spanish chroniclers, some of whom actually talked to the local people and learned about them and learned some of their stories, their mythology, and so forth. And that's available today to learn so that people can understand a bit more about how the Chimu people lived. So this is just one representation of that. Um, but the Chimu people lived there until the Incas took over in 1470, if I remember correctly, and or roughly around that time. And the Inca ruled for a very short time until the Spanish conquered them in the 1500s. Here's some examples of Chimu goldwork and some pottery. It's some really interesting pottery because here's an example of a squash um, in depicted in pottery. Another squash here, same thing. Whoops, the one on the right is a shark, and obviously corn was part of the Peruvian diet. And this thing in the lower center is again one of the caballitos de Totoro, showing two people riding it, presumably in the waves with fish below. I found that a very nice pot to show. Um, so let me jump now to the Pachacamac people. Basically, what happened with Carol and I is that after everybody else from our tour left, Carol and I stayed behind, and we were able to get somebody who really understood this culture to take us to Pachacamac, which is the was originally a coastal city. It was founded sometime around the 600s Christian era. It was apparently started as a small religious community, and it maintained um, that connection and that sense into the Inca period. This fellow on the right is uh, a structure that was found there. This tall wooden structure, supposed to be the god Pachacamac. But here it is in today's situation. You see a lot of dirt, sand. In the distance, you can see encroachment of the city of Lima. Um, and just to give you an idea, it has a number of areas within the structure that show, um, this map shows how extensive it was and where the old city streets existed. Um, there's one they've got a very, well, I'll show that later. Sorry. But again, here's some more of the structure, and then right on top of it, if you will, is part of the city, extended suburbs of the city of Lima, clearly sitting on top of some of the old land from what used to be Pachacama. But if you go through this, you see a number of both stone structures and stone pieces of stone walls, and together with adobe. Here's some more of it. And that, what I should have said here is that this is one of the temples that is in that structure overall. Here is the north-south road of Pachacamac, and this, what they do every so often have a tablet like this that shows you a picture and some description of what it is in both Spanish and English, which is nice. And this one shows this north-south road, which I just showed you an example of in actual situation, and east-west. It's crossed by an east-west road as well. Again, Huaca structure with excavation going on. We're not allowed to go. I wasn't allowed to go into that at the time. But one of the things that I found intriguing there was these bits of cloth, which may or may not be prehistoric, but they're sitting in the soil. Here's an example of a bone there. I don't know what kind of bone that is, but it's interesting to you walk through and you see these kinds of things. And here is the Sun Temple there. And I'll show you a better picture. There we go. As we get closer, you can see the walls that have been exposed of this Sun Temple by the archaeologists. And you can actually climb up there and on top of it, look around and so forth. Again, this is just south of Lima, about an hour drive, even in traffic. And here's what they think the Sun Temple looked like originally. The and I don't have much to say about this except that it was quite extensive. And again, some more of the sand and terrain outside. Here's a structure that they uncovered and restored in part of it, so you can get an idea. And I see that I'm up against, well, I'm a little bit over time. But thanks for listening, and I'm open for questions.
I don't have a question, Ray, but I have a comment which I thought was really cool in your presentation when you were talking about Huaca Cayo Viejo in the beginning,
Uh-huh.
and the lady there, and then you jump and you showed the vase with the A, B, C, and the D characters on it. Um,
Uh-huh.
Christopher Donnan from UCLA has looked at lots and lots of the moche pots that all show that same motif of those same four characters.
Uh-huh.
And one of them's the lady and one of them's the Lord of Sapan. And then you show the burial of the Lords of Sapan and what they actually think that, or he proposes that is the recreation of a myth, that these are four, important characters in their mythology.
Uh-huh.
And
Well, that
and at
that would make sense.
these sites, they're different, different people in those sites take on those roles, even in death.
Yeah. Oh,
And the
that's
and
interesting. Yeah.
and the A character in that vase, the D character was the lady, and I believe A was the Lord of Sapan, and I think the C character is called the Jester, or at least that's what Bauman calls them.
Oh, is that right?
So
Okay.
it was interesting to see that because I knew it existed in Sapan, but I didn't know it was at that southern site. So that was pretty cool, and they used the burials and the large corpus of those images on ceramics to actually, as much as they can, restore the myth or reconstruct the myth.
Well, it's intriguing to me, and at any rate, a good example that in that case, in the case of the Moche and the Chimu, to some extent, they've got so much of this information on the pots, and in their case, it seems to be a case of just reading them all, um, because there are thousands of these things around the world, and I I find the scenes on the pot very intriguing. And I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I should have shown some of them directly in here. Um, I if I ever give this talk to somebody else, I'll put those in as well, because they should be in there so you can see them. Um, we were able to purchase pots with scenes on them from local modern people who made reproductions of them. Um, I decided our budget didn't extend quite so far as to purchase a bunch of those. Not to mention the lack of space and luggage, but um, any rate,
Okay.
I have to. One of the things I would like to say too, and I'll take more questions in a minute, um, is that this conservancy trip went off extremely well. We had um, guides that were very knowledgeable. We had the local people who from what's called Peruvian Odyssey, a tour company, um, who arranged all of this for the conservancy, and everything worked like it should. So there were no late buses, no late vans, any of those things that you sometimes run into in putting together a complicated trip. There were 22 um, participants, and there was always one or two guides along with us to explain some of the things that we were seeing. Um, and the guides that they chose were extremely knowledgeable, and or at least or at least they sounded extremely knowledgeable, uh, and did a very good job.
Ray,
But yeah,
this is
hey
Brian.
Brian, hey
Uh,
Brian.
you talked about the orientation of a couple of the villages. How close are those to? You said that they were north south. Have there
Yeah.
been measurements? How close is it to true north, south, east, west?
I
And
don't know
is
the
that
answer to that. Yeah, I have not delved at all into the astronomical alignments of
okay?
this, strangely enough. Um, I was been more focused on delivering a talk that really lets people who've never encountered any of this before have some idea of what the archaeology there is like. Um,
It's
for
phenomenal.
me, an incredible experience to see this up front um, and real close.
Yeah, I was there in 2017, I think, and I was absolutely amazed. And I didn't do any measurements while I was there in terms of astronomical alignments and so forth.
Mm.
But I was just blown away by the detail in the artistry, as well
Yeah,
as the, how shall I say, the hugeness of some of these sites.
yeah,
Chan Chan, just, I was
yeah.
amazed.
John. Yeah,
I mean, it's like going into New York City almost.
yeah, yeah. It's very impressive, and all out of adobe brick. That's the thing that keeps getting me.
We were
Um,
told
it
that it's the largest adobe structure in the world.
That's right. Yeah, apparently that's true. Um, they you go to the Inca sites and see them, and you just marvel at the stonework that they did and so forth.
Yeah.
Very different kind of structures. Um, so we did get the chance. We did visit the Sacred Valley and
Mhm.
Cuzco. We spent a week essentially visiting Machu Picchu and the sites in the Sacred Valley
Yeah.
and
Amazing.
around Cusco itself. So we did get a chance to see all that. But I thought, for me, what was more interesting and because I'd known a little bit about the Inca was all of this other stuff that I didn't know about. Jason, did you have a question earlier?
I well, I do have a question, but I want to draw attention to Joyce Clark's comment in the chat
Uh-huh.
and a
Oh, I didn't
question
see.
there. So I'll yield there, and we can come back to mine.
Um,
Looks like the serpent shown in the Moche murals. I think it was murals. They were painted yellow.
right,
Are they
right.
thought to be feathered serpents?
Um, I don't know the answer to that. Any of the details, I don't know. I don't have that information, sadly. So I should have made it clear that this is really based on my experience traveling there and also visiting. I mean, and then doing quite a bit of research afterwards to pull together a talk that made sense.
So that kind of segues a little bit into my comment was um, I think Ed Barnhart points out a lot of similarities in Western Mexico to some things in Peru, specifically in Mixtec decapitations and gold working,
Uh-huh.
and then some
Interesting.
other shaft burials and stirrup vessels, which I'm not
Uh-huh.
exactly the reference. I don't remember exactly the details of what the stirrup vessels are, but I think the point is that
Oh,
there's a lot more decapitations are rare in uh, Mexico, but fairly
yeah.
common in South America, and that's on by itself seems to be um, good evidence to indicate like at least contact and trade and
I
of
see.
ideas.
I I
Um,
don't know. That's very interesting. I mean, it's quite a distance though, and
I can
you have
comment
to.
on that a little bit.
Oh, good.
Um, so what he's referencing there, I believe, is actually the existence of the Toomey knife, which we've seen in a lot of these early images.
Mhm.
The Toomey knife is
Huh,
the decapitator
It's
blade,
right,
but there's a great gulf of time between these early and Andean civilizations and the you know those later Mexican cultures.
mhm.
There's a great time depth there. So there likely was that trip, that contact that was probably a little bit further north from like Ecuador.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. Yeah.
but Ecuador and a lot of these cultures did exist in Ecuador too. Later,
right.
right around the time of the Inca. Like Pachacama and the Wari, those would have been much more contemporary.
Mhm. And I also advocate for indirect contact, right? Like almost like a telephone, right? Like you've got, you know, 5 or 6 different cultures lined up along the way, right? And
Mhm.
while on either end they don't have direct contact with each other, but they're interacting with everybody in between, and those materials and ideas just spread. Uh,
Well, and also you have to realize, for example, the presence of corn in Peru. And I have not done the research yet in this, but corn is a very today is very common there. That you find it served in all the meals or many of the meals. They also have sell dried corn, um, like corn nuts, um, but it's a very different type of corn and much larger kernels. And they even market this as Inca corn.
Mm.
Um, it's interesting stuff and very tasty. So, um, but so what the reason I've mentioned that is because um, the products of agriculture and so forth do move a- through geographical space, and so it's very possible that there was a kind of distant contact, the kind of contact you're talking about, Jason, that where it's indirect in the sense that the say the Moche people did not directly um, interact with people from Mexico in the same period, but some of their items may have made it um, south, or items made from the south to the north as well. Um,
I have 2 more quick
so
questions.
yeah,
One, the pyramids you showed looked like hmm, basically they're earthwork mound pyramids based on the way that they're
yeah, right, right,
uh,
right.
weathered and eroded. So that is just kind of interesting as far as like a construction factor. I think that seems also kind of rare in that region. Is that true, or is it more common than?
Well, that they built up the structure in a stepped manner, which they had to because the adobe bricks couldn't um, couldn't support a whole lot of weight. So they basically had to be, as I say, stepped structures.
Mhm. Interesting. Cool.
So when they eroded, they just fell into this, um, all of this adobe turned into sand at the
Mm.
top, um, but it was preserved below because um, of the desert conditions of the area.
Mm. Mm.
One of the things that I didn't mention, but I should have probably, was that also they were very dependent on uh, the El Nino, and every once in a while El Nino goes nuts, and it has caused in more modern times, for example, the movement of the warm waters of the Pacific further north, pushing a lot of the fish stock that people around Peru depend on up into Ecuador and beyond. And that in today's world is very disruptive. Um, and there were periods in the prehistory where the archaeologists can determine that they probably went years in drought. So with different different weather conditions. So when you've got a society that depends very much on, say, El Nino um, rhythm, and then suddenly you don't have it, that is extremely disruptive, and is also probably a a reason that they did so much sacrifice. I mean, there's some places that come to light recently where there were I don't know, 25 or 30 burials of little young boys in a field, and the idea was is probably um, to help to help in future agriculture. So um, there's lots of since um, since we started looking into Peruvian archaeology, I'm discovering that there's all these articles that I'm suddenly seeing, and I know I see them because I pick up on them, not because there's so many new articles on Peruvian archaeology. But there's a lot being discovered recently in different parts of Peru that were beyond the areas that we actually visited on this tour. So unless there's other questions,
Yep.
uh,
I do have one more question, unless
yes, sir.
somebody else has something, because I feel like the glove you showed, is that contemporary or
The
pre-Hispanic?
which?
The glove, the ornately decorated
Yeah, that
glove.
was. Oh no, that was from the Moche people.
It's
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
know.
remarkably
It,
well preserved.
yeah,
Looks like just an
yeah.
oven mitt, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
A
if
pretty
I,
not.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I could just wrap it up with an astronomy statement. All these coastal civilizations were very, very much had a solar cult, and
Yes.
there's a lot of alignment built into there. Greg Benford, who's an archaeologist there that Kim collaborated with a lot, told me it's everywhere, and you can see the evidence of it everywhere, and that persisted on through the following cultures, which by the time we get to the Inca, who declared themselves the son of the sun, they've already
Right.
had this baked into all the people that they intended to rule, and masterfully used that to wield power and
Yeah. I
retain
mean,
power.
what's really interesting about the Inca, non-astronomical, but but that they were able to take over essentially the entire country of Peru um, with very quickly by what they did was establish groups of people who were allied with the Inca in these other places and use them there to keep the peace in the area and keep the people in line with Inca objectives. So um, they were able to basically, in a very short period, establish their rule over this whole area. Pretty impressive. And by the way, they were there in Pachacamac. There are structures in Pachacamac which are Inca structures. I should have mentioned that. And because not only can you find examples there of pre-Inca Wari structures and objects and so forth in the archaeology in these areas, you are also it's a connection to the distant past um, in Pachacamac as a pilgrimage site because it remained a pilgrimage site for the Inca as well.
All right. Well, I also wanted to kind of close it out by just mentioning that our society is in a fundraising campaign
Oh
this
yes,
season. And programs like Journal Club depend on support from our members and anybody we can get to visit our Colorado Gives page. We teamed up with Colorado Gives for this year. I put the link to our Colorado Gives page in the chat, and please visit it. This year, if we can raise donations, there's a lot of matching money and prizes and things like that that will help us financially in the future. So please help that out, and thank you
Good.
all for coming.
Good night.
Thank you
Good
for
night.
the advertisement. Good.
Got to do it.
Thank you, Ray.
Goodbye. You're
All right.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.